All right, so I'm going to try to continue on with this theme about the shadow, or actually less about shadow, more about dark, because we're doing YellBRo Dark live stream right now. That's right. And this is going to be a question about psychology and imperialism. And I watched some of this yesterday, and I was partially hopeful and partially disappointed, but you'll see why. Before I get started, don't forget to share, support, hopefully donate to Devon's Journey to Recovery, to helping victims of Africom, Cohen Daly, the Australian boy. Also, help out some content creators, Stevie, aka Redneck Economics, Sleepy J, Buy Him a Coffee, OCB, James. Dude, the people don't want their names. And Ali Alexandra, who also doesn't want her donation thing shared anymore. Too late. Sorry. Share, support, and donate to all of them. All links are in the description box. All right. So here we have. This was recommended on my feed. This always happens because I'm not subscribed to these guys. I don't really watch their videos, but the same channels constantly get recommended to me. I don't know if that's suspicious or not. I'm just saying that's just what happens. Maybe because you watch people like them that they recommend them too, which I'm okay with that. So yeah, there's a video from Fred Hampton Leftists. They were recommended. I watched them yesterday, and they kick up an interesting discussion about the psychology of imperialism. I think they're doing more of not like how, maybe less so about the pernicious nature of what a government, like a creepy government body could do, and more of its effects on the minds of people suffering under it. I'm like, oh, okay. But, I mean, for me, the attempt to go there is the most interesting part, and the part I'm like, yeah. Their conclusions don't go far enough for me. But, you know what? Let's listen to it. Here we go.
You guys see the title of this video.
Up there.
We always like to brainstorm these very crucial ideas and understanding how we got this rampant
Sorry, just
imperialist state
checking
that we
audio.
have. And I think what Kareem and what Peter talks about a lot when it comes to the psychology of imperialism, I think it plays a big role in how they're able to sell war. When I hear Peter talk about this before, and Peter and Kareem talk about this before.
All right, let me speed them up as well. Decent amount to get through.
But I want to toss it to you guys first because you guys do a lot of discussion about this content. We can start with Kareem and then we go to Peter and we work our way around.
Kareem or
How will you
Cream?
define in your guys' work? We start with Kareem. What do you mean when you say psychology of imperialism? What is that concept, Kareem?
Yeah, it's a very difficult and broad discussion, but I think something that hasn't gotten a lot of proper attention, in my opinion. It did have some attention in the margins, but not very centrally. And Peter and myself, sorry, Peter and myself, we are, you could say, political and social psychologists. So we try to tie the sociological and the political sciences to the psychological part of human behavior. And what you've seen in history is and often people talk about post-colonialism. We are in a post-colonial world and all that kind of stuff. And I see Asal already with one eyebrow. Yeah, she doesn't believe in the term, and I totally agree with her. We are not in a post-colonial world. But the interesting thing is that we could say, a kind of territorial decolonization in the 20th century, where settler colonialists would either disappear or they would settle forever, like in Australia and New Zealand, and we just call that their own country now. But there's something we haven't really focused on enough, in my opinion, and that is the psychological part of colonialism. That is the how can I say that, the intense psychological suffering and struggling of people who suffer under, not only under, the physical part of colonialism, but also the psychological part of colonialism and imperialism.
I just want to add. So far, I don't really use the word imperialism. I'll use something like corruption because then it's a little more blanketed. It can cover not just what nation states do, but also what individuals, just in their everyday people, like they're people that do horrible shit in the world, all over the place. I, I think there's more well-meaning people than there are corrupt. But just say, all right, I don't use the word imperialism, but I get what he's saying. It makes sense to me. Yeah, It makes sense to me. Rewind a little bit.
Suffering and struggling of people who suffer under not only under the physical part of colonialism, but also the psychological part of colonialism.
All right, let me just add the physical part is straight up affecting the psyche. If I cut your arm, I'm affecting your mind. Typically, conditionally.
And imperialism, how the rhetoric, for example, that is being used by, let's say, public officials or in stories or even in religion, how that shapes people's self-image, okay? How that shaped the image of Africans, for example, who are suffering under colonialism, how that shaped Asian self-image who suffered under colonialism, how that shaped African Americans' image suffering under imperialism and colonialism, and the same with Arabs in Europe, for example. And I think this is such an important part of the discussion on imperialism, how the empire and the geopolitical dynamics, how that influences people's self-image. Let's say the way our public officials speak about Muslims, the way they speak about African Americans, the way our movies portray people, all in a way to repeat that narrative of empire. You know what I mean? So what you often see, and that is what Josanna also said last time, is that you see a lot of people who grow up in this world, in this imperial world, who are not part of that so-called how can I say that central group that has dominance, let's say European whites, also not only during the European colonialism, but also during United States imperialism, that everybody who doesn't fit that central image of humanity suffers in a way psychologically, because they're always portrayed in a way that is a form of demonization. So you would see that pretty much all over the world, the African continent, the Asian continent, Latin America, that there, for example, a lot of people use skin bleach. Why are they using skin bleach? How come that such a huge part of the world is bleaching their skin because they think that their natural skin is not good enough? How come that a lot of Muslims in the West, for example, try to de-identify with their Muslim identity because they grew up in a Western society, let's say Denmark or the Netherlands? You know what I mean? So what I'm trying to say is that our public officials, but also in our movies and in our media, people do not realize the intense psychological suffering that goes along with that kind of imperial world that we live in, and the narratives it creates about other groups of people. Okay, so I try to squeeze it in a short, in a few words, but let's just chat about it, and then we can try and unpack this a bit.
Okay, so basically how the world is conditioning people to view other people through media and entertainment, and probably just how people are treated. Like, if we keep invading certain countries, like, it'll look a certain way, right? To like, hey, maybe I'm not valued. The most obvious, recent example would clearly be black guys getting killed in horror movies. No, it'd be 9/11 and Arabs and all the chaos that happened from that. I would say yes. There is an aspect. There is an aspect to that, a conditioning aspect to that. Right? Anything to a person who is not self-examined, right? Who hasn't gone through the quote-unquote shadow work to piece through themselves and figure out who they really are, to really build that understanding of who you are and your principles and all that. Yes, if you were in that conditional state, environmentally conditioned state, to where you're not even anything being thrown at your psyche is just not being questioned, it just flows right through. Why is he happy? He's smiling. Just that's it. Just accepting whatever stimuli you get. Yes, this type of thing can happen. 100%. Obviously, there's the opposite of that, which also happens quite often. Let's be real, guys. What's the number one genre of music in the world right now? It's got to be hip hop. Hip hop and R&B, and like a mixture of them. right? That has to be number one. I'm sure Drake's like, no. But the K-pop, right? Yeah, it's basically like Americanized R&B. Yeah, but you know, hip hoppy R&B type shit is the number one sound in the world as far as like musically, pop culturally, on a massive level, right? Uh, it could be something to where it's like the social shadow, the thing that used to be hidden in the shadow, maybe like black culture or something that is now like on the forefront, dominating the clothing styles, what's the most popular sports, right? That culture has bubbled up and is like basically taken over the fucking planet. Be real about this. So there's like, it's not just strictly, uh, you know, minorities feeling bad about themselves because, you know, Superman was always white and I feel bad about myself for it and whatnot. Uh, but at the same time, there is that aspect. It is there, 100%. Not for everybody, but I'm sure it's there for plenty of people. This woman, Josanna, she says she has went through it in regards to like looking at herself and saying, "Fuck, I'm ugly because the pretty girl's always this in the movie or in the whatever." Right? And which is terrible. That sucks. But that's definitely that's an aspect of it. Now, what my problem is with these guys, uh, my problem is gonna be, okay, what do we do about that? If that's your diagnosis, that the colonialist, the small group, these typically uh, European white men, European men, are typically at the forefront of this dominating thing. Uh, how do we fix the images so that people don't look down on themselves or others don't look down on them? How do we fix that? That's where it gets a little dark. From silly dark to dark dark. Right, the silly dark would be like, let's make 5 black Supermen. Or let's make one Asian Superman, one black Superman, one Arab Superman. Samoan? Black Adam. Like Egyptian and shit. He's supposed to look. Whatever. Let's make Batman a woman. Whatever. Those are the silly, kind of dark thing. Like, because they may seem like, you know, I mean, they're kind of shallow things, right? You see the culture warriors going apeshit about it. But at the core of it is like, is this some sort of cultural revenge for maybe being crapped on for however many years? Like, is this how we go about it? Who knows? But it's kind of shallow and silly. I get it. And then there's the dark, dark one. What's your solution to it on that level? Uh, it would be hard for me to see it anything other than basically social reprogramming, as opposed to freeing people, right? Because if you look at it, they're not diagnosing the problem as conditioning. They're diagnosing it as the dominant culture of the European man is, you know, imprinting on the minds of everyone else. They're not diagnosing it as like, hey, maybe we should find a way for people not to be conditioned by ideas like this. Or maybe we should find a way for like, hey, if people have some sort of critical thinking skills or have the ability to go through some sort of existential journey to where they're not so enamored by social conditioning, we don't have to deal with those problems. But that's not how they're diagnosing it. At least that's not what I'm hearing so far. So your solution to that, to what this guy just diagnosed, the solution would be like mass reprogramming. I mean, Please tell me I'm wrong about that. I would enjoy being wrong. What's up, Tender? But once again, I say this a lot, but your diagnosis is always it's going to have your solution kind of intertwined right next to it. Right? If you tell a doctor the exact, like, hey, this exact bone is broken in this exact region, in this exact way, they don't even need to look at it in order to be like, here's the fix for it. Oh, it's a whatever technical term, femur or some shit. I don't know. Yeah, femur break at this point and right here and blah blah blah. So we got to put screws in it this way to do this. Blah blah blah. Cast it and stay off your feet for whatever weeks or months, whatever. And it's like, oh, it's kind of like once you diagnose it correctly, the solution to it is right there next to it. You're flying blind, you don't have a solution, period. If you take not just a guess, but a wild guess, as far as like the diagnosis of it, if you make a wild guess, oh boy. And you can be coming out with solutions out the out the fucking ass. But do they really attach to the diagnosis? Because you didn't really do the real diagnosis of it. To me, that's the real work that has to be done. All of these scenarios. Now, the rest of the panel does go, but I'm going to stop it there. I rambled too much, to be honest with you. But I think that's such an important thing to recognize. Okay. They're very, or this guy at least, and I think that when I listen to the other people, they seem very astute about what they're saying, right? They studied it. But the question is like, it's like, hey guys, you might need a mixture of what Josanna was saying and this lady. I forgot her name. I'm gonna turn this off. Sal? Sal. I said that right. The Sal girl was being very academic with how she's like, and these social factors and blah blah blah, like blah 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 blah. And the Josanna girl is coming straight up from like emotion and personal experience. Like, I looked at myself this way. And she's like crying about it, like very emotional. Like you need like a balance of that. Not only do you need to, okay, let me look at all the statistics or data or just straight up. You don't even need that really. You can just look more at like social observations of things. That might even do you better, to be honest with you. But you know, you have the data and all that shit too. That's cool. You want that quote unquote empirical type of studying mixed with the actual experience of it, the skin in the game part. Like I've went through this, or I went through what this thing actually like the deep core idea attached to this particular thing, right? I may not like. There could be someone like I may not be African American, but I don't. But I can understand what he's saying because I've went through something like self-esteem or someone looking at you sideways because maybe you were the weird guy in class, maybe you're the poor kid in class, or whatever. You can get to the core of that experience, of that feeling. Thus, you're like, okay, I know I can diagnose this thing. What is this? How do I fix this? I have an intimate relationship with the thing that's being diagnosed, and then then the solution it's like it's right next to it. So, once again, in non-rambling, simple terms, if the problem is that people are viewing other people based on some sort of social programming, like, do you want your solution to be other social programming, or do you want it to be people free from social programming? That's basically what I'm asking. All right. Please subscribe if you like, comment, agree, disagree. Tell me what you think. Go watch the rest of the video. I'm sure there's a bunch of the video I missed, so they could be like straight up like, explaining everything, like saying everything that I just said and I just missed it. So please go check the video. Don't forget to share, support, hopefully donate to all the links, everything. Donate to all of them in the description box. With all that said, give this video a thumbs down.